We're going to start off this third part of the ecology program by discussing ecological pyramids or pyramid diagrams. The first of these we've already talked about a little bit, and that is the energy pyramid, which is the energy transfer from one trophic level to another. Other pyramids include the biomass pyramid. Biomass is defined as the total mass of all living matter in any particular area. And it's usually measured as mass or matter per unit area. The biomass, as I said, is the mass of living matter. And then the third pyramid we're going to talk about is the number pyramid. And the number pyramid looks at the number of organisms at each trophic level. So here's an example of a pyramid diagram. And the wider the base of the level, the more energy that's available in that level. And so you see at the bottom is the producers. Producers capture energy from the sun, and they have the widest or the largest amount of energy. And as I said in my previous part 2 of these videos, as you go up the pyramid, you lose energy. And so the pyramid gets smaller and smaller moving up. And so you go from producers to herbivores with the loss of energy, from herbivores to carnivores with the loss of energy, from carnivores to the apex or top predator with the loss of energy. So looking at it this way, and this also shows you something about the biomass that occurs as you move up as well. And so you start at the bottom of this pyramid and you have the primary producers with the most energy and the largest biomass. And you move up and you lose 90% of the energy. And you lose some degree of the biomass as you go into the primary consumers, the grasshoppers, ants, caterpillars, things like that eat the plants. You move up to the secondary consumers, the frog, the rat, the sparrow that eat these small primary consumers. You lose biomass and you lose another 90% of the energy. Moving to tertiary consumers, snakes and owls, and you have a smaller biomass and you lose another 90% until you reach the apex predator, the quaternary consumer, in this case the eagle. You have an extremely small biomass and a very small remaining energy from the original amount of energy at the bottom. Looking at it, this is just another diagram looking at the same thing with the same story, which is as you move up, you lose 90% at each level of the energy, and you lose some degree of the biomass as you move up until you reach the apex predator, which again in this case is the eagle. And there's consistent energy transfer as you move up. However, there's a great deal of energy lost moving up the various trophic levels. We're going to shift now to special nutritional relationships. And special nutritional relationships occur in an environment, and the largest defined group is called symbiosis. And symbiosis is a term that just means that organisms that live together in a close relationship one to another with varying degrees of impact on each other's lives. And these three terms that I've put on here, relationships between organisms. The first of these is mutualism. Mutualism is a symbiotic relationship where both organisms benefit. So a close relationship or a symbiotic relationship where both organisms benefit. Parasitism, on the other hand, is a symbiotic relationship where one organism benefits at the expense of the other organism. So one organism benefits, the other organism is deterred or harmed in some way. Commensalism is a symbiotic relationship where one organism benefits and the other, it has no effect on the other organism. So here are some examples of various types of special nutritional relationships. When a flea sits on the top of a cat, the flea sucks blood out of the cat. The cat, while it survives, that is a detrimental relationship to the cat, and the flea benefits. This is similarly true for the parasitic fluke that can get into a human, not in the United States, but it does occur in Asia. And the fluke eats from the human to the human's detriment. Commensalism, as I said, is where the one organism benefits. Here, Spanish moss benefits the tree. It has no effect on the tree. The barnacle benefits. It has no effect on the whale. The clownfish hiding here in the anemone benefits. The anemone acts as a protector to the clownfish. The anemone does not benefit from the clownfish, but the clownfish benefits from being protected from predators. And then mutualism is where both organisms benefit. The bee in the flower, the bee gets the honey and the flower gets pollinated. And we'll explain that more when we're in the plant section. The sloth and the algae both benefit one with the other. And then the tick bird and the rhino, the bird eats the ticks and benefits from that. And the rhino benefits from the bird doing that removal of the tick. Some other relationships include predation, which is a word which means the relationship between the hunter and the hunted. Competition, where two or more organisms are striving for the same limited resources. Amensalism, which is when one organism inhibits the growth or other activity of another organism. And then naturalism, which is where organisms share just an indirect relationship between each other. Now down here at the bottom, we're looking at a predation relationship. Here is the cat, and it eats the zebra, and they're in sort of a relationship here. And this is a situation where you have the cat and the hunter and the hunted. Here's a competition. Here's the limited resource, which is a recently killed animal. And these two hyenas are battling out for this hyena. That's a competitive situation. The amensal interaction is a situation where the organism inhibits another organism. What happens here, this is a fungus called Penicillium fungus, and you might have guessed the penicillium mold is what's responsible for the production of penicillin. Penicillin, being an antibiotic, inhibits the bacteria, and so it prevents the bacteria. So this would be an example of an amensal relationship. Over here you have neutralism. These are species that live together, and they essentially just live together. They don't have any impact on each other. A herbivory is an area where grazing animals feed on plants, but they specifically only eat part of the plant, the top part, leaving enough of the plant so that it never kills the plant, and the plant continues to grow. And so preserving its food source as the plant recovers from the eating. Now, one species that has a problem with this is sheep, because sheep tend to graze too close to the ground and can kill the plants. And so there are situations where you have to be very careful with sheep so that they don't destroy the herbivory. I want to end this video by talking about the various nutrient cycles that exist in the ecosystems. And these are biogeochemical cycles where nutrients are recycled and minerals are recycled in the environment. One type of biogeochemical cycle is a hydrologic cycle, which is the movement of water throughout the ecosystem. And this is actually referred to in Ecclesiastes when he describes the fact that water runs down, enters the ocean, but the ocean is never filled. And then the rain comes and the water runs down, but the ocean is never filled. And he looks at it, this cycle, as vanity and a vexation of spirit. Atmospheric cycles are when nutrients are recycled or cycled, and they are primarily in the gaseous form. One example of this is the carbon-oxygen cycle, where there's a recycling of carbon and a recycling of oxygen through the atmosphere, plants, animals, water, and soil. Then there's the sedimentary cycle, which is the nutrients that are found in soil and in rocks. One example of this is the phosphorus cycle, which moves through the soil into producers to consumers, and then when the consumers die, the phosphorus returns to the soil and the cycle begins again. So here's a picture of the water cycle. And the water cycle, this shows, for example, over here you have evaporation from the land, evaporation from the water here, and the plants transpire, which means they release water into the atmosphere. This water vapor then goes up and is condensed in the clouds. The water then falls as precipitation. The water then runs down, enters the groundwater, the water table, and then also enters the stream. And it can be drank by animals as well as taken up again by the plants, and then the cycle repeats itself. Here is the water cycle again in a more cartoon-like picture. And again, you see the evaporation from the oceans, you see the transpiration from plants. Transpiration is just the exchange of water into the atmosphere by the plant. It then condenses, forming clouds, ultimately leading to precipitation and snow in the higher elevations. This leads to runoff back into the oceans, runoff into the streams, and these streams can eventually run into the ocean. And then there's groundwater, which is water underground that also flows into the oceans, and the cycle begins again. This is an example of the carbon-oxygen cycle. The carbon-oxygen cycle, photosynthesis produces oxygen, which then is taken in by the animal in respiration. The animal respires, produces carbon dioxide, which goes back into the plant through photosynthesis, and then the plant produces nutrients that the animal eats. The animal eventually dies and decomposes. The plants eventually die and decompose, and then these release carbon dioxide also into the atmosphere. Here's another vision or a picture of the carbon dioxide oxygen cycle, and you start up here with oxygen in the air. It's taken in by an animal or enters into the ground through the animal's death and the waste. Respiration produces carbon dioxide, which goes into the air. Dead plants and dead animals are eaten by decomposers. The decomposers also produce carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide is taken up by plants and makes oxygen. And this continues. One of the biggest sources of atmospheric oxygen is the algae that exists in the oceans. The phosphorus cycle is one of those sedimentary cycles. Phosphorus is a main component in living and non-living areas, and it is taken up. We'll start here in the underground phosphorus reserve. Phosphorus is taken up by plants, eaten by animals, taken up by animals. The animals die, and the decomposers recycle the phosphorus into the underground parts of the earth. This is then leached out of the ground into the water. There's an underwater phosphorus reserve, and phosphorus running off from the land. This goes up into the ground in the areas here, and then is ultimately taken up in this area. And then when rain comes down, it dissolves phosphorus and takes it back into the ground.